Welcome to the Seizure Turnaround, where we explore the topic of functional seizures through conversations with people who provide an unfiltered record of their experience. Today we're joined by Natalie, whose pragmatic approach is a testament to the power of grit and self-advocacy when recovering from functional seizures. Welcome to the Seizure Turnaround, Natalie.
Thank you for having me, Lana.
So tell us how you came to have functional seizures and what your life was like before you developed them.
Before the seizures, probably for the last sort of 8 years prior to the seizures, I was new to motherhood. I was going through the stages of adapting to being a mum and really struggling with that. I had moved from Sydney down to the Illawarra area with my husband, so I was going through a lot of really big changes. I was working in community services space, but yeah, the hardest part for me before the seizures was just really trying to be a good mum and manage my mental health whilst doing that as best as I could, and also trying to work. So I was sort of trying to juggle a lot of things and adapting to this change in my life. I admitted myself to a private mental health clinic. They had like a 3-week program there. So I used that as a preventative to go and sort of manage the depression and anxiety and stuff that I was going through. And it was in that hospital during a group session, just within my first couple of days of being in the hospital, that I experienced my first seizure.
What was that like?
It was terrifying. It was so strange. I was in a room with 15 other women who were all there for all different experiences. The session that day, we were talking about anger, and I was just having some real inner turmoil about my experience in life with my mental health. I was questioning myself, thinking, I've had all these different diagnoses over my life, but what's the real core issue here? And I came to the realization that it was trauma. It was all stemmed from, I guess, the medical term of trauma. I prefer not to say trauma. I sort of more see it as a childhood stress, childhood wounds that I just had, just undiagnosed mental health from a really young age. I was a very sensitive child with a lot going on in my head. I internalized everything, every argument, every situation with friends. And in that moment, I just had that realization, and I felt my body and my mind just separated. Like my mind floated out of that room. My body stayed in that room. The first sort of symptom that I experienced was I was staring at the floor whilst there were all these discussions happening, and I couldn't move my eyes. So my eyes just fixated on the floor. And then my body just went into complete paralysis. I could not move. My head slumped forward. My hands clenched into like claw positions. I started drooling. My nose started running, and I was just in this frozen state. I could not move, but I could hear everyone around me. The social worker who was running the session tried to sort of get me to talk, but I just couldn't talk. I could hear her. She called in some nurses. The nurses came in. They applied ice packs to my wrists where my hands were clamping, ice packs to my head. And after about 30 minutes, I managed to sort of start to speak, but my body was still paralyzed. I couldn't move my hands or my body. And then probably another 10 minutes later, I could finally release my hands and start to move again. I was just shocked. I was just sort of said to them, like, what was that? What just happened? And the social worker said, look, I think you just dissociated. I said, well, what does that mean? This is all new to me. What do you mean I've dissociated? It was really shocking. That lady in that room was fantastic. But after that session, I really didn't get much follow-up from the people at the hospital. They didn't sort of explain to me what had happened. I felt really scared of, oh my gosh, is that going to happen again? So I ended up leaving the hospital earlier than expected because I just didn't feel safe there.
So you were worried that you might have another one?
Yeah, and the next day I started to have another one in the same room, and they applied ice packs again. And after that, because I wasn't getting, I guess, some one-on-one support outside of those sessions about what was happening, I just felt completely out of control, and I just wanted to go home and be with my family. So yeah, that was, and I kind of left that hospital, and I've been dealing with it ever since, really.
Wow. How long ago was that?
So that was in March 2023, so 2 and a bit years ago. And yeah, that first year was definitely the hardest. I have been seizure free for a while now, so it's been about a year, but that first year was just horrendous. It was really challenging. At that time, the only sort of health practitioners I was seeing was my GP and a clinical psychologist. The GP, she didn't really explain what it was. She just sort of put it down to dizzy spells. and wasn't giving me much information. But the clinical psychologist I went to, she was absolutely fantastic. She suggested it might be functional neurological disorder. And she opened my world. She gave me some resources. She told me about a program for FND that was running out of one of our local hospitals. SBS have an insight program on functional seizures. So she said, "Oh, maybe go check that out." And I went and checked that out. And from there, I kind of started to really drive it. So I went and booked in to see a neurologist. I got the EEG and I had an MRI. I even had a seizure during the appointment with a neurologist. My husband was with me in that appointment and I was, slumped on the chair next to this neurologist. And my husband said to him, "Oh, I think she's having a seizure now." And he said, "Oh, she'll be all right. She'll be okay." And he just left me there, slumped over in pain with these cramps in my hands and just continued to discuss my condition to my husband.
And how did that feel?
Oh, just completely, I felt completely dismissed. My husband wanted to help me by putting me into the recovery position, caring for me, but the neurologist kind of just sort of shoot him off a bit. So I never saw that neurologist again. That really turned me off. He gave me the diagnosis then of functional neurological disorder, but that experience was really not a nice one.
So how long was that diagnosis then after the initial symptom or the first seizure?
Maybe about 6 weeks.
Pretty quick.
It was quick, but yeah, that kind of did turn me off moving forward. And that's when, instead of leaning on the health professionals, I ended up going down the path of connecting with other people with FND. That was my way of moving forward.
Yeah, so it sounds like you just completely took things into your own hands and just thought, I've got to sort of find out about this and connect with other people who have that. And that's sometimes a double-edged sword.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess it depends where you get your information or what forums you're on. I really want to hear from you how you've navigated that and what you found to be really helpful and whether there's anything you found to be not so helpful.
Yeah, sure. So I connected with a Facebook group. It's called FND Australia Support Services. And that's a lot of people who have FND in Australia who post different things. And I just found it really helpful going and hearing about all the different things that people are experiencing and how they're managing those symptoms. So I got a lot of really good advice. And sometimes I would post saying, "Look, I'm having these seizures. This is what my seizures look like. How have you managed this in your experience?" And got some really good tips. And then I just trialed all of them really and just sort of try to mold my own recovery and see what would work, what wouldn't work. And that was a lot of trial and error. It's really frustrating. You just want to stop the seizures and you want it to stop quickly. You want to stop impacting your whole family, everyone around you. I felt really on my own, even though I had that community online. I wish I had doctors and professionals who were really guiding and leading me. So that really lacked in my experience.
I am really curious to know what you actually tried and what things for you worked and what things didn't work.
I think the most helpful thing for me, and this is actually something I didn't learn on the FND forums, I loved TikTok. And I started following some women who, and I don't know if they still do this now, but they would do TikToks whilst they're in mental health facilities and talking about their recovery. And I was watching some of them and I saw a young girl who has a sensory toolkit and she showed on TikTok a little makeup bag that she has and she's got all of her sensory tools in there. So she has smelling oils, she'd have like squishy toys, sour lollies. And so I thought, oh, that's a great idea. So I'm going to do that. So I went to Kmart, I went and bought my own little kit. I filled it with oils, sour lollies, and I got some instant ice packs and I put them in that kit. And I carried that everywhere I went. And I started to utilize that. When I felt a seizure come on, I would get my little toolkit out and I would just go to work. I would smell the oils. If the oils weren't working, I would have a sour lolly. If the sour lolly wasn't working, I'd get the ice packs out and I'd be moving around. So if I sat still, the seizures would just take over me. I had to get up, I had to move around and use these tools. So I'd be walking around the house, juggling a ball while sucking on a lolly, just doing multiple things. And eventually that kind of took my mind off the seizure. It calmed me down. And then I would try and shift my focus onto a different activity. So if I was doing something that caused that stress, I would discontinue that thing. If that was a conversation I was having, and I'd go play with my dog or I'd go outside and I'd just disrupt that moment that was causing the symptoms, I guess.
So what oils did you find helpful in your case?
I had smells that I really like. I love jasmine. Jasmine reminds me of really amazing memories of childhood and smells of jasmine on our pool fence. So things that made like that automatically just go, oh, that smells so good. I have heard of people putting chili on their tongue. So anything that's going to shock your senses. Some people might even smell chili in like a little spice jar. Whatever's going to take your mind off the symptoms of feeling, oh no, I'm going to have a seizure. It's really disrupting that anxiety.
Mm.
I found that if I could disrupt the anxiety of, oh no, I'm going to have a seizure, that is what eventually stopped. Like I could stop the seizure from coming. So it's just managing that feeling, that emotion.
Mm. So it sounds like there's some sensory grounding, but there's also the cognitive grounding of sort of controlling your mind. Is it a
Mm.
case of mind over matter, or how much do you think that plays a role?
I think, look, I don't think I'll ever be able to stop every single seizure. Like just the other week, went under general anesthesia just for a routine sort of check. And coming out of that anesthesia, the nurses were trying to wake me up. And I thought I was just struggling to wake up from the anesthesia, but I had gone into full paralysis. And I could sense the nurse started getting a little bit nervous, like, why isn't she waking up? And then I started having the fit. So I started the jerking motion, and the nurse could tell that I was having a seizure. Looking back, thinking about why did that happen? I think when I woke up from anesthesia, having someone shaking me, trying to wake me up, reminded me of having the seizures before, because that's what would happen. You'd have a seizure and people would be trying to sort of wake you up. My body, without even realizing it, just switched straight into shutdown mode. Nah, I'm having a seizure. I didn't even get the chance to use any of my tools because I was completely out of it. So it's still likely that they might still pop up, but I guess I can just manage the ones that I can.
Yeah. So you started using all these tools fairly quickly, it sounds like.
Yes.
How long did it take you to learn to manage them?
It was a full year. And yeah, that was a year that, I'll never forget that year. I tell you, it was the most stressful thing. And feeling so out of control is just such a yucky feeling.
Mm.
Um, and it was a lot of trial and error, frustrations, deep sadness. One of the negatives of connecting with the F&D community for me was that I would see people or hear about people who are worse off than me. And then I started to think, what if I wake up one day and I can't walk, like this lady who's now in a wheelchair? And then those dark moments of, this is my life. Like, I'm going to be forever disabled. I won't be able to be a mum. I won't be able to drive my kids to school. I can't parent. My marriage will fall apart. You can start to spiral. So that's one thing I've learned to really be really mindful when I do connect with the F&D community. I'm only doing it if I have a new symptom or something and I'm looking for some tools and tips, but to not go down the rabbit hole of doom scrolling for me.
I think that's so important. Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And what about, can you tell us, you mentioned the ice. What do you do with the ice?
So the ice packs, they're fantastic. That's probably been the most helpful tool is the instant ice packs. You can just get them from the chemist. You just crack them and I put them on my face, back of my neck, my chest, my arms. And that just helps because I think a lot of FND people have this symptom of getting super hot really quickly. And that just brings your temperature down. That helps soothe a little bit. If I'm at home, I'll jump in and have a cold shower. So anything cold, just bring that temperature down. I've got a pool, I'll jump into the pool. Obviously, I wouldn't do that alone. Like my husband would be there and I'd jump in the pool and get out quickly just to really bring my temps down. So those ice packs are fantastic. I'd recommend anyone who has seizures to carry those around with them as a backup.
Mm. What about anything that you tried and didn't work?
I only tried these tools, but sometimes they wouldn't work. So it was then I had to have like what do kids call it when they game and they've got all of their tools? There's a word, but like you've got all these options. And if one option wouldn't work, I would just move to the next option. So one time the ice pack might not work, but that's okay because I've got my sour lollies. Or that's okay, I'm going to juggle a ball. That's okay, I've got this. I had the next option because if the ice pack don't work one day, what you don't want to do, I found, is to get overwhelmed, freak out, get anxious, have a seizure. So it's
Mm.
kind of just move on to your next tool and eventually just keep going through them. And then one of them will work. Or even just thinking about all those tools is getting
Mm.
your mind off the seizure. You're just thinking about, okay, I'll try this. Another thing that helps is singing and tapping songs in my head. One moment that really changed things for me is I met a new friend. We went out for coffee and she started disclosing stuff to me that was, her being really vulnerable. And I wanted to be really friendly and listen to what she was saying. But I started to dissociate and I started to feel like I was having a seizure. So I was in this position of, I don't want to do this here. She doesn't know about these seizures. I want to keep this friendship. And so I wasn't able to get out my toolkit. I wasn't able to move around the cafe. So I was stuck in this seat. And I thought, okay, how can I manage this? And so what I did, I just started singing a song and tapping to it on my legs.
In your head?
Yeah, in my head. So I'm listening to her, but I'm singing a song and I'm tapping on my leg. That didn't work. So then I started pinching my legs to the beat of the song and tapping my feet. And I just focused on my breathing and focused on her facial features and what she was wearing. And that calmed my anxiety down. What that did for me is it gave me confidence that I can now manage a seizure without actually having to have that whole toolkit, without having to get up and leave the situation. I can actually self-soothe in that moment and stay still. It's just all about managing that anxiety and just trying to be calm. So that was trial and error.
That's incredible. And it must give you such a sense of agency as well and control.
Oh, I felt free. After that, I came home and I said to my husband, I stopped the seizure and I sat in a chair at a cafe and I was continuing a conversation during this. And that woman has no idea any of that happened. She's got no idea. Well, I hope she doesn't realize that I was still trying to listen to her, but that experience, it's left me feeling like I can manage the majority of these seizures. Like I have recovered, I can manage these seizures, but it's never gone from my body. If I'm having a conversation with someone and I get bored and my head starts to wander and or dissociate, I feel like I'm going to dissociate into a seizure. So even just losing interest now, I get the feelings of having a seizure. So I'm still managing it weekly. And if any big emotion comes, straight away I get that dump of that blood rushing from my body. Oh, it's happening again. So the symptoms haven't stopped, but the seizures have stopped.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, how great not having those symptoms at all. I think I'm getting less and less bothered by them. When I feel them coming, I don't pay attention to it. It's just an automatic response of mine in my body, but I don't give it oxygen. I don't let it get me worked up. I'm like, oh, well, and I'll just do any of the tools that I need to help manage it. But I try not to focus on it, make it a big deal, because I feel the more attention I give it, the worse it can get. So it's balancing how much attention I give to it. And that's the same as the F&D community. I don't look on the Facebook pages because I'm trying to live a life now where I'm not thinking about so much all the internal stuff. I'm trying to just function and just live life and be a mum. And the less focus for me at this point, the better.
Yeah. Often we say it's like a plant. If you don't water it and you don't attend to it, it will just gradually die. But if you keep watering it and giving it lots of attention, even if it's a weed, it's going to grow.
I love that analogy. I think that's similar with the mental health side of things. For me, like I know everyone's with F&D's experience different, but mine is very connected with my mental health. And I have found not engaging in focusing so much on my diagnoses and trying to connect with the community of that diagnosis. Now that I'm putting it aside and just focusing on other things in my life, that's really helped improve my life and my mental health and the seizures. But I think it was really critical in that beginning phase and with mental health to get the diagnosis and to connect with the community. But for me, that has an end point to be able to move and function. I had to do that in the beginning, but then I had to actually separate and move on from that space and only go back every now and then where I need to. Otherwise, I felt like I'd be trapped in that fixation of that disorder or that condition.
And it can become enmeshed with your identity.
You've said it so perfectly. That identity piece, I really clutched onto that with Dear Life. And it was important for that to be a part of my identity for a period of time. But I had to separate from it to really recover, both with my mental health and with the seizures. That was a big part for me of letting that identity go and really focusing on what is my identity. I'm not Nat with a mental health condition. I'm not Nat with F&D. I'm Nat who does this, Nat who does that. And just shifting that focus has really helped. I found that probably one of the most crucial steps to not be recovering, but be recovered.
How did you begin to separate your identity from the, sick or unwell or ill version of yourself? And what was that process like?
Yeah, I had to just stop talking about it. A lot of people would just always ask, "Oh, how's the seizures going?" I'd go pick up my kids from school and people would say, "Oh, how's the seizures going?" I was like, and so I had to kind of just stop those conversations from happening. So I'd be like, "Oh, good, yep, I'm recovered." Even though I wasn't at that time, I was just like, "Yep, brush it off." And so people would stop asking. So that was helpful. And I said to my loved ones, "Stop asking me. I just want to stop talking about it." The other part was to just not spend so much time online, because the more I would read of other people's FND, I just felt it would pull me back a little bit into that, remembering what that was like. And I think that wasn't a helpful thing.
Mm.
And I had to stop in my mind, I'm not sick. Yeah. I just had to keep saying, I'm not sick. I'm fine. I'm fine. And it was just another way of convincing my brain, just like with the seizures, I'm not going to have a seizure. I'm fine. This is what I'm going to do. And I had to have that mindset for this. Like, I'm not sick. This was just a moment in my life. Moving on.
So it was a real mental shift as well.
Yeah, yes, yeah. I had to fight it. I had to really fight it, because it was essential that in the beginning, it was a part of my identity. I don't take that away. That was actually really important, that I aligned with the community and engaged with them and the professionals with what this condition was. But yes, I feel that if I had stayed with that identity and that condition for too long, it probably would have gotten in the way of this recovery. Things like when I was in the workplace and I had a seizure plan and all that sort of stuff, and people at work would ask, I just had to set up some boundaries. I'm not going to talk about seizures anymore. I'm all fine. If I have one, you'll know about it. Like, let's stop the discussions, because that's going to actually help me. So it's being, again, more assertive in myself, advocating for what I need and people around me to do, and to not say around me, to help the process.
It sounds like you had to do quite a bit of educating of others, which is really important. And I suppose people are asking those questions because they
Of
want to show that
course.
they care and they do genuinely care. And so I imagine
Mm.
that's quite tricky sometimes to actually say, hey, I know you care, but
Yeah, and you know what? One thing that really helped is when someone would ask me about it, I started saying, "Oh, I actually can't talk about it because it actually can bring on a seizure."
right.
So they go, "Oh, okay, don't worry, we won't talk about it." And that really does stop people from asking. And it actually does, even coming to this podcast, all the symptoms start, because I know that I'm going to start talking about FND. So it really is an actual thing of talking about it does bring those symptoms on. When you get to that point where you feel that you're recovered, like you've got them under control, it is really something you've got to manage. Who you tell, who you discuss it with, because is it helpful having it as part of an ongoing conversation if you want to try to remove yourself from it? It's funny because when you're going through it in the beginning, people do need to know, because you need people around you to know what to do when you have a seizure. And it's all the
Mm,
talk of the town, Nat's having
mm.
seizures and we need to know what to do. And it's this kind of everyone helps. And then
Yeah.
you kind of have to cut all those cords. You're kind of like, okay, everyone stop. Everyone like,
On another level, that's difficult too, because you've had all this love and care and attention,
mm.
and suddenly later you say, cut the cord. How does that feel?
You feel bad because you know that everyone's being loving and caring. But I think it was, like you said before, it was part of me educating everyone that the more I focus and talk about this stuff, the more it sets me backwards. And I just need to think of other things and try and put this behind me so it's not an ongoing thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Out of interest, how much warning sign do you normally get before the seizure?
It's funny because some seizures have gotten me really quickly, and those are the ones that are usually from emotional distress, like a situation that I wasn't expecting. The lead up to the seizure, it's much smaller, and so I have to grab it really quickly. For example, one of those was in a work meeting, and the topic just completely changed, and it was a very emotional topic that was brought up that I didn't realize that we were having this discussion. There were people who were really upset in the meeting, and it just got me really quickly, and I had a seizure in the workplace in front of all these work people. I think the challenge in that situation is because you're stuck in a room and you feel like you can't just excuse yourself. So I've learned that if I'm in a situation where something's happened and I start getting the symptoms really quickly, I have now built the confidence that I will just leave the room regardless of the situation. If it's going to offend someone, if I'm sitting with a boss, or even if I'm in a job interview, I know that they're so quick, I have to get up and leave because if I don't, it'll catch me. So that's one example of where I've learned that I have to be really assertive in what I need in that moment. But that did come with some practice of realizing that if I don't do that, then the seizure will come. So a lot of it's through just experiences that have happened that I've built up my self-confidence, but my confidence to advocate for myself and to not muck around with it and not care what people think, their opinions and thoughts about me if I need to leave to manage the symptoms.
And are we talking seconds or minutes? Can you give us a time frame of, like you said, the really quick ones? What's quick for you?
Well, quick was so in that work meeting, everyone was having the discussion, and it wasn't until I started speaking, it was during that conversation, boom, I was hit with the first symptoms, and probably 30 seconds later, my head was slumped forward and I had completely zoned out into the seizure. But I had that 30 seconds, but I didn't have the confidence to get up and leave the room where I should have. So now I know that if that happened again, I would get up and I'd walk out.
Yeah. Okay. So did you always have those few seconds or up to 30 seconds?
Yeah, I did. I always, like the first symptoms, it's usually pretty much the same. It's like the blood just rushes out of my whole body from the top of my head all the way down to my feet. It's like I feel like a real big pressure drop. That's usually the first sign. And then I just start to dissociate. I feel like my head's just floating away from my body and then getting the really hot, hot, hot feeling. My body's just overheating. So those symptoms can come on. And then if I manage them, they can go. Sometimes it can take 30 minutes for me to completely get those symptoms away. When I was still learning how to deal with this, I'd be working at it for an hour to stop the seizure.
Wow, that's incredible persistence.
Oh, it was a lot of work, yeah. But a lot of that was in the workplace. I felt like I was going to have a seizure at work, so I had to figure this out. And then that got shorter and shorter. So the better I got at that sort of working away the seizure got shorter to now I can do it within a couple of minutes.
Yeah, right. And some people say that they can ward the seizure off, but then they don't bother because they think that they're going to have it anyway, say when they get home from work. Did that ever happen to you or?
It didn't happen. I would just be absolutely exhausted. Doing that is so draining. So for that circumstance, I'd go home and I'd just crash out. I'd get home at 5 o'clock. My husband would have to look after the kids and I'd just sleep. And sometimes like the thought is it's just easier, just not easier, but just to have the seizure and then it's done, right? But if I work off a seizure, sometimes it can be hours after that I'm still trying to kind of just manage it and get it to go away. And then I'm exhausted. So it's like prolonged the whole situation where if I just had the seizure, that'd be 30 to 40 minutes where I'm in the seizure and then it's done. And then I'm tired, but it's done for the day.
Yeah. So it sounds like instead of the short-term gain, you went for the short-term pain, but long-term gain or.
Yeah, I did. Well, yeah, it was less disruptive and it didn't meet my end goal. Like I wanted to stop the seizures from happening.
Mm.
Trust me, I wanted to, like in those moments, some of those moments, I actually just wanted to have that seizure because I felt better afterwards.
Did you find that you felt a sense of relief? Some people say that they feel a sense of relief after they have it. Or.
Yeah, yes. Oh, absolutely. Like during a seizure, so leading up to a seizure, for me, it's usually a really high emotional situation that my body is fighting some sort of emotion. When I'm in that seizure, I have no emotion. There's literally, I can hear what's going on, but I have no emotion, no anxiety, no sadness, nothing. I'm completely zoned out. And that's really peaceful. So that can be a nice sort of, I could just get rid of all these emotions right now and just have this seizure. And that's what I think that's why my body does it. It's a smart way of doing it, right? Hey, like your brain can just go, hey, let's just completely switch off. Let's not have any of these feelings and emotions. Let's just go to this nice warm little cocoon. And actually, I feel better once I've had the seizure. I do. But I had to really think about the disruption on my life those seizures were causing to work, to school, to kids, to family life. And I really didn't allow myself to think too much about that as a solution and to fight and push through. And now I'm on the other side and it was worth it. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of resilience, but it has worked for me. I'm not saying that I'm always going to be seizure free, but I definitely do feel like I've got way more control.
Oh, yeah. Well, the year's a long time. That's amazing. And just talking about your journey to recovery, what was the biggest internal battle that you fought for recovery? Like, was there a specific thought or mindset or feeling that you had to overcome, and how did you do that?
Probably that nothing's going to work, thinking that nothing's going to work. Like, this is my state. This is just my life now. That thought kept creeping in, that nothing's going to work. These therapies aren't going to work. And there's no hope. I think just losing hope. And I had to experience that and sit through those emotions and have a really think about what path and what choice I wanted to make. And I chose to, even though I couldn't see the hope in the beginning phases, the seizures weren't getting better and I just felt so dark, I kind of had to force the hope by experimenting with all these different ways of how I could potentially try and treat it. I found that seeing myself as a bit of an experiment, as a way to create hope, I guess, because some of those things started working. I felt, okay, I've got this problem, this condition that's really ruining my life at the moment. I don't feel like I'm going to get better. But what I can do is play with it, play with all these different options. And I just chipped away at it bit by bit. And bit by bit, I started to get more hope, because once I started to find some of those things working, oh, it was so amazing. I just felt, oh my God, okay, I'm onto something, and then I just keep going down that path, and it built up my hope.
Mm. And you mentioned that strong emotion as one of your triggers, or
Mhm.
was. What was the most challenging emotion to process, and how did you learn to sit with that instead of running from it?
That's a really good question. You know what? That's something I've only really learned this year, is the wave of emotion. A lot of it was anything that's been, what's the right word? Something that I think is really wrong. So something's happened that I think is that it's unjust, it's unfair, and I feel like I've got to do something, got to say something, this isn't right. And that creates a big emotion for me. And usually I would then respond and I'd say the things I want to say or do the things I want to do. And that would always cause issues for me, right? Like, because I'm speaking out of emotion. And it's only really been this year that I've been able to take a step back. When I get that big flood, like it's a physical flood of emotion, and that's now the signs of the seizures, this big flood that rushes through me, I've learned to see it like I don't need to do anything. I don't need to say anything. Just feel the emotion, let it come, let it go, and then move on. And I knew that in theory before, but this year something sort of changed in me that I can actually really practice that now. And something can happen that I feel like I have to speak up and I have to do something. But now I can let the wave of emotion wash over me.
Yeah, people with functional seizures are trying to learn to be more assertive. And it sounds like you were really assertive with your emotion.
Too assertive, too much that it was destructive. You know, I would quit jobs that I really loved because I had a disagreement with someone, or, I would offend someone because they said something offensive. So I would stick up for what I thought was right, but really I should have just let them have their opinion and just leave it. So it was this sort of, this inner turmoil. Yeah.
Was it almost like a sense of, if it was a situation that you couldn't control, was it you wanted to control it and you couldn't, and that led to the emotion, or?
I think so. Yeah. It's funny. I guess it's something, there's bits of it I'm still trying to understand why I do those things, why I feel that if something's wrong, that I have to be the one to I'm like the fixer. I have to fix it and I have to let this person understand what they've said is wrong or offensive, I don't know. There's probably so much to uncover there.
Have you always been like that since you were a child, or?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from when I was like a kid and a teenager. I wouldn't voice really my opinions and thoughts much, and I just internalized everything. And that's where a lot of my problems came, is it was just so much I internalized and never voiced and worked through, and it all just stuck inside of me. And then I sort of started to learn how to express myself more in my 20s when I started going to a lot of therapy and things like that. But I think that kind of just took its own form, probably not in the most healthiest way. I got a bit, it was uncontrollable, the emotion, and how I would manage my emotion without being so disruptive.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think will help you get rid of the reacting to strong emotions and that strong rush feeling that you get? What are your goals and what are you working on?
I think that this year it's just observing that wave of emotion and feeling and not reacting. Like that's taken, I'm turning 43 soon. It's taken my whole life to not respond to these massive emotions. I guess this is a current experiment that I'm living right now is I'm watching it happen to me. Like,
Mm.
woo, that was a big one. That was a big feeling of emotion there. And just kind of breathe, like taking a big breath and not doing the thing that my body and mind wants to do straight away. So not biting back at someone or not quitting the job or not, not being instant. Okay, I've had this emotion. I have to do something about it. Um, so it's kind of pausing and slowing it all down and not being so reactive to the emotions. I'm still playing with what works and building up this new muscle that I'm trying to develop, which is a bit of fun, to be honest. Like it's incredible already.
Mm. So, can you tell us about the dystonia that you had in your hand and a little bit about that story?
Yeah. So in the early days of the seizures, I would have the full body paralysis and my hands would clench into this claw. And it's so painful. Your whole body is, well, your hands are just in extreme, excruciating pain and you can't move it because you're paralyzed. So I went and told my psychologist at the time. She's a yoga teacher as well. And she said, oh, she's been in classes before where they've done breath work and like they're doing the short breath work. And she saw some of the people in her class would get that exact claw, like cramping feeling. And she said, oh, I wonder if it is lack of oxygen. And I said, oh, that's so interesting. So I went home that night and told my husband, and he said, oh, okay, well, how about when you have another seizure, we'll put you in the recovery position, open up your airways, and see if that makes a difference. So, sure enough, the next seizure I had, he put me in the recovery position, opened up my neck so that I wasn't slumped forward. And I've never had that claw again since that day. So, that was just so helpful because that meant that the seizures weren't painful anymore. It took away that pain, all just from a lack of oxygen. So, yeah, that was a big, amazing tip from my psychologist.
Yeah, great. Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you have for people who are newly diagnosed with these seizures?
I think just realize that it's going to be a hard run to start with. And that's just part of the journey you're going to be on. It's going to be quite challenging to figure this out, to get the right team around you, be that health professionals, community, or your family or friends. It's going to take a bit of time. And I think the hard thing with this is you don't know how long it's going to take you. So the not knowing is really scary and stressful. But I think my advice is to try not to think too far in the future. Just focus on the now and focus on the symptoms that you're experiencing now. Try and get the help that you need. Start trying out the different tools and tricks. Find out what works for you. And you're just going to have to dedicate this time in your life to as low stress as you can. If you can leave work, if that's beneficial for you, you can look into your superannuation, your insurance, which is what I had to do for a period of time. Or if you have to continue work, just try and really lower your stress levels as much as you can, which is very hard in the most stressful period of your life dealing with this. But you're just going to have to dedicate some time to healing and reaching out to the F&D community for some help and support, knowing that you're not alone, I think is really helpful. The program that I did here in the Illawarra was really fantastic. It was run by psychologists and was connected with other people with F&D. There was about 8 of us, all through video call. That was brilliant. I got to meet other people and learn about things that I didn't realize was part of F&D, like the dizziness. They were the ones who told me that, yeah, that's part of F&D.
Mm. And do you think learning about those things lowers the anxiety because then you don't worry so much about those things, or?
Yeah, definitely. Well, with the dizzy thing, I went onto the F&D community Facebook page and I couldn't find anyone that had experienced it, but I had known that it was a thing. I managed to work through it and I learned a little tool of how to fix it. So I went on there and I posted it. Hey, everyone, just letting you know, I experienced the dizziness for a week. This is how I managed it.
How did you manage it?
Oh, it was so funny. It was so weird. It was this weird thing of you feel so dizzy, so nauseous that you have to keep lying down, right? So I'd get up and I felt like I was just in a spinning room, so I'd lie down. And so I just stayed lying down for like a week. And then I got to the end, I was like, I can't do this. So what I did was I pushed through I feel sick, I feel dizzy, I'm going to lie down. And I said to Mum, okay, we need to go out for the day and I need to not lie down. And we went out and we went walking, we went shopping, and I still felt so sick. And I'm like, nah, I can't lie down because I've got to stop this cycle. And I stayed out all day. I stayed on my feet all day and I woke up the next day and it was gone. It was so weird. I just had to trick my body into thinking, no, I'm not dizzy. Even though I was dizzy, I had to tell myself, no, I'm not dizzy. I'm not going to lie down. And it stopped it. It was so bizarre.
Mm. A lot of patients who do fully recover seem to have that, I don't know what you'd call it, maybe grit or determination to really take responsibility for their own recovery.
Look, I've been fighting my brain for most of my life. There's many times where I have wanted to give up, but when you've got a beautiful life to live and you want to push through and have a great quality of life, you just got to keep trying. You've just got to keep going and leave no stone unturned. And it really is like solving a puzzle. It's like problem solving. This dizziness is happening. What can I do? Okay, my body's telling me to lie down. How about if I don't listen to my body and I push myself? And that worked. That might not have worked, but I tried it. So it really is just trying things that maybe don't make any sense, but it's just trying and keep trying until you find something that works. That can be exhausting, but what's your other option? Living like this and being in a way that you can't parent, you can't live healthily, and you've got to rely on people. I think just keep trying. But I also really want to be wary that there are people who have it far worse than I do, and that this might be a very different scenario for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for anybody listening to this that has the condition and for people treating the condition, is there anything else that you think is really important for people to understand?
Yeah, for me, since having these seizures 2 years ago, now I am the best I have ever been mentally. I have done the most healing. And the only reason I could do that is when I had that seizure on that day in that hospital, it was confirmation to me that I had these really deep wounds from childhood that I had not addressed, that I had never fully processed. And it was that seizure, because during that seizure, I was having that internal conflict, thinking, well, was it bad enough? Was it really trauma? Was it that traumatic? My body had that seizure. And for me, I see that, yes, it was that traumatic for you. This is the confirmation for you that it was. Your body's having a full seizure. So I see that not as a gift, but it was an opportunity for me to then go back to my childhood and really process the wounds that I had that needed healing. And I've been able to do that this past year. So obviously the first year was just managing the symptoms and that was chaotic. But once I got the symptoms managed as best I could, that opened something in me that I could actually get deep, deep, deep down into my psyche and do the work of what was happening underneath everything. Obviously, I don't wish this condition on anyone, and I'm not thankful or grateful that I had it. I'd rather have this realization and awakening without the seizures. However, it has happened this way, and yeah.
Mm. So, a lot of people find it really difficult initially to make the mind-body connection when they're first diagnosed. You know, you're having a physical symptom and then someone's saying to you, well, these may have a psychological or emotional basis. Do you have any advice for people that are really trying very hard to make that connection but are just struggling?
It's a hard one because it's both. It is your physical body, but you've got to try and see if you can rewire your thinking, rewire your response. It's like you're learning a new sport. At the beginning, I was like, no, this is my body. My body is rejecting me. My body is doing this to me. I had no control of it. I didn't, but then I did. And that took a lot of work trying to figure it out. And that's really exhausting and that's really tiring. And it can be really disheartening when it doesn't work. But if I didn't stick to it and I didn't keep trying, I wouldn't be where I am now. So I'm so glad that I do have that grit and that I haven't given into it. And I'd encourage everyone else to just, be kind to yourself. When it doesn't work, rest and then try again another day.
Mm. So, Nat, that day when you had the first seizure in the hospital, if you could have talked to yourself right then and there, what one piece of advice would you have given yourself?
Nat, you've worked through some pretty hard things in your life and you can work through this as well. In that moment, this was so different to what I'd ever experienced, I didn't realize that I already had a lot of the tools and skills I needed. So I wasn't as inexperienced as I thought.
Mm, that's beautiful advice. Thank you so much, Nat, for coming on. It's another viewpoint and it's a great eye opener into another way to approach recovering from these things. So, really, really appreciate your time and coming on to share that with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Seizure Turnaround. Next time, we'll be exploring the power of poetry in functional seizure recovery. Until then, stay well.